Liam Hawke had been working as an intelligence officer for the Intergalactic Federation for nearly 5 years. He had seen his fair share of political unrest, disputes, and even violent confrontations between rival factions, but nothing had prepared him for what was about to happen. To him, this mission seemed like just another routine assignment, one of those missions that didn't require too much attention, where nothing particularly important happened. But Liam was wrong, very wrong. His task was simple enough: to observe the tensions between the miners on Glacier Station and the Federation's officials. Glacier Station was a small, cold mining colony on a frozen moon, far from the well-lit cities of the core worlds. It was a place where the Federation relied on workers to extract precious minerals used in countless technologies, from energy cells to spacefaring vessels. There had been rumors of unrest. Workers were complaining about harsh conditions, poor wages, and long hours. The Federation, of course, saw it all as nothing more than a few disgruntled miners who wanted more than they were entitled to. So, they sent Liam to investigate and keep the peace. When Liam first arrived at Glacier Station, it felt just like any other Federation outpost. The station's metallic walls were cold to the touch, the air thick with the scent of recycled oxygen. There were workers everywhere, some in small clusters talking among themselves, others hunched over in front of large machines. Liam had visited mining colonies before, so he knew what to expect: tough, rugged people who worked long hours to extract minerals from the planet's surface. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a necessary job. The mission started off as planned. Liam spent the first few days speaking with local officials, observing the daily operations, and making sure there were no signs of an imminent uprising. The complaints from the miners seemed to be nothing more than everyday grumbling. The Federation had always been good at handling these types of complaints, offering temporary fixes and dismissing long-term concerns. Liam figured it was just another minor issue, something to be dealt with quickly and without much fuss. But then, everything changed. One afternoon, while Liam was reviewing reports in his small office, an officer from the Federation arrived unexpectedly. He was tall, with a sharp jawline and piercing eyes, his uniform crisp and immaculate. He introduced himself as Captain Aurelius, a member of the Federation's elite military unit. He had urgent news, but not the kind of news Liam was expecting. "You're not going to like this, Hawke," Captain Aurelius said, his voice low. "We've just received word that someone high up in the Federation is sending a special envoy to this station. They want the situation resolved quietly and they want you to assist." Liam frowned. "A special envoy? From where?" "A royal family," the captain replied. Liam's mind raced. Royal families were rare in the Federation, but they existed. The most powerful family was the Royal House of Eloria, known for their long-standing influence over the galaxy's political affairs. The last thing Liam expected was for one of their own to come to a remote mining colony like Glacier Station. "Who exactly are we talking about?" Liam asked, trying to understand the significance. "You'll see soon enough. They'll be arriving on the next shuttle." That was all the captain would say. Confused but curious, Liam prepared for the arrival of the royal envoy. The next day, the shuttle landed at Glacier Station. It wasn't anything special at first glance, just a standard Federation ship with a royal insignia. However, there was something off about it. For one, the shuttle was completely silent as it touched down. No fanfare, no large entourage of security. It was as if the arrival of this royal envoy was meant to be discreet. Liam watched as the shuttle's ramp lowered, revealing a figure dressed in a simple yet elegant uniform. The figure was cloaked, the face hidden behind a veil. They stepped forward with purpose, accompanied by only a single aide. The security detail was minimal, almost as if they wanted to remain unnoticed. Then, as the figure came closer, the cloak was pulled back, revealing the face beneath. It was a young woman with striking features and an air of confidence. She stood tall, with a look of determination in her eyes, as though she had faced many battles before and come out on top. The last thing Liam expected was for someone so regal to be so normal. She didn't carry herself like royalty. There was no sign of arrogance or superiority. Instead, she exuded a sense of calm strength, as though she knew the weight of her responsibility but bore it with grace. The woman extended her hand toward Liam. "You must be Officer Hawk," she said in a calm, soothing voice. "I am Princess Allura, and I've been sent by the royal house of Aloria to investigate the situation here." Liam blinked. He had heard the name Princess Allura before. She was the youngest daughter of Queen Selene, the monarch of Aloria. But why was she here, on a remote mining station, with such a low-profile arrival? And why hadn't he been informed of her identity sooner? "I didn't know the royal family had an interest in a mining colony," Liam said, trying to hide his surprise. Princess Allura smiled faintly. "You'd be surprised what the royal family cares about. The miners here have been voicing their concerns, and there's a lot more going on than meets the eye. My job is to uncover the truth." Her words struck a chord with Liam. He had been so focused on his routine mission that he hadn't considered the possibility that there might be something deeper at play. The unrest among the miners wasn't just about pay, it was about something more significant. But what? "I'm afraid I'm not sure what the truth is, Princess," Liam admitted, his mind spinning with questions. "The situation here seems fairly contained." "I think you'll find it's more complex than you realize," Allura replied cryptically. With that, Princess Allura asked Liam to show her around the station, and he agreed. The more he observed her, the more he realized that she wasn't just another royal figure. There was something different about her. She wasn't acting like someone who had been pampered and protected all her life. She was sharp, quick-witted, and focused on the task at hand. Her presence was undeniable, but it wasn't the kind of presence that demanded attention. Instead, it was the kind that commanded respect. As they walked through the station, Allura's sharp eyes never missed a detail. She noticed the small cracks in the walls, the discontent in the workers' faces, and the quiet tension in the air. It was clear she was not only seeing the surface issues, but the underlying causes that had led to the unrest. "This is worse than I thought," she said quietly as they stopped near a group of miners discussing the latest dispute over pay. "These people are being treated like tools, not like workers." Liam was taken aback by her words. He had been trained to remain neutral, to observe and report without getting too emotionally involved. But there was something about Allura's words that struck a chord. He had always believed the Federation was doing what was necessary to maintain order, but now he wasn't so sure. Before he could respond, a loud noise erupted from the nearby worksite. A large piece of machinery had malfunctioned, causing a minor explosion. Workers scattered in panic, and Liam immediately rushed to the scene to ensure there were no serious injuries. Allura, however, remained calm. She watched the scene unfold, her gaze unwavering. "This is just the beginning," she said softly, "but it won't be the last. The truth is about to come to light, and it's going to change everything." Liam had no idea what she meant, but as he looked at her with newfound respect, he realized this was no ordinary assignment. Something much larger was unfolding, and it involved not just the miners, but the very core of the Federation itself. As the days passed on Glacier Station, Liam and Princess Allura grew more acquainted with one another. Initially, Liam had treated her as just another royal figure, someone sent to supervise the situation from afar. But now, he couldn't ignore how different she was from other members of the royal family he had encountered. She wasn't interested in living in luxury or hiding away behind walls of security. Instead, she preferred to walk among the people, speak to the workers, and learn their stories. Allura had insisted on meeting everyone, from the miners deep within the shafts to the engineers who maintained the station's systems. She listened to their concerns with genuine interest, asking questions that went beyond what was expected. She wasn't just asking about pay raises or working conditions. She was probing deeper into the underlying causes of the unrest. She asked about their families, their struggles, and what they dreamed of beyond the walls of the station. She made it clear that she wasn't just a princess. She was a person who wanted to understand and help. One evening, as Liam walked with Alora back to the station's central hub, he could see the exhaustion on her face. The strain of her mission was beginning to show. Yet her eyes still shone with determination. "Are you sure you want to keep pushing yourself this hard?" Liam asked gently. "You don't have to do all of this yourself." Alora stopped and turned to him, her eyes locking with his. "I've seen too much of the Federation's treatment of its citizens to just sit back and do nothing. These people deserve more than being forgotten. If I can help them, I will." Liam was taken aback by the fire in her words. He had never seen a royal who was so dedicated to the common people. He had always viewed royalty as distant figures, wrapped up in politics and luxury, but Alora was different. She had no pretensions about her title. She wasn't here to command or judge. She was here to understand and make a difference. The following days were filled with more meetings, more interviews, and more walks through the colony. Alora was relentless in her quest to uncover the truth, and Liam was right by her side, assisting her however he could. They made a striking pair, her regal presence tempered by a sense of genuine care, and him, a quiet officer who had once only seen his job as a way to follow orders. But it wasn't long before things began to take a darker turn. One afternoon, as they were walking through one of the mining sectors, a miner approached them, his face pale with worry. He was breathless, clearly afraid. "Officer Hawk, Princess," he said, his voice shaking. "You need to come with me now. There's something you need to see." Liam exchanged a glance with Alora, who gave him a small nod. Without a word, the two followed the miner through the narrow corridors of the station. The air felt colder the deeper they went, the walls of the station pressing in as they navigated the maze-like hallways. The miner led them to a small, dimly lit room. Inside, a group of workers huddled around something. Their eyes were wide with fear, their faces pale. Liam's heart raced as he stepped closer, trying to make sense of the situation. But then he saw it, a collection of documents scattered on a table, maps, contracts, and figures that didn't make sense. "This is," Alora began, her voice trailing off. She picked up one of the contracts, scanning the details. "This is a plan for a takeover." Liam's eyes widened in realization. The Federation isn't just keeping control of this station. They've been plotting to take over the entire mining sector. These documents, they're all about control of the stellarite reserves. Stellarite was one of the rarest and most valuable minerals in the galaxy. Its power was unmatched, capable of fueling entire star systems or acting as a stabilizer for intergalactic travel. Whoever controlled the reserves of stellarite controlled the future of the galaxy. This wasn't just about a few disgruntled miners, it was about something far more dangerous. Alora's grip tightened on the paper as she turned to Liam. "We have to stop them. This is much bigger than we thought." Liam nodded grimly. "But how? The Federation's reach is vast. If they've been planning this, they're not going to stop just because we found these documents." Alora's eyes sparkled with determination. "I don't care how big they are. They will be stopped." That night they gathered a small group of trusted miners, those who had shown signs of resistance to the Federation's corruption. They couldn't trust everyone, not yet, but these men and women were ready to take a stand. Together, they began formulating a plan to expose the conspiracy, to take down those within the Federation who had been exploiting the workers for their own gain. The next day, Alora and Liam presented the documents to the colony's leadership. The leaders, though initially shocked, couldn't deny the evidence. The conspiracy was real. But to Liam's surprise, instead of being thankful for the revelation, they began to distance themselves from the situation. It was as if they feared the consequences of what Allura had uncovered. "They'll do anything to protect their own power," Allura muttered under her breath as she watched the leaders dismiss the issue. "They won't act, not unless we force their hand." Liam's mind raced. This wasn't just a matter of politics, it was a matter of survival. If the Federation was allowed to carry out their plan, the miners would be at the mercy of those who cared only for profit. The very people who had worked tirelessly for generations would be left with nothing. As the days went by, tensions grew. The workers' unrest reached new heights, and whispers of rebellion spread through the station like wildfire. The Federation's forces were already on edge, ready to crack down on any signs of defiance. Liam and Allura knew that if they didn't act fast, the situation would spiral out of control. One evening, as they sat in the small makeshift command center, Allura turned to Liam with a serious expression. "We need to gather support. We can't do this alone." Liam nodded. "But who can we trust? There's a lot at stake here. If we make the wrong move, if we don't make a move, we'll lose everything," Allura replied firmly. "We can't afford to wait." And so, with the weight of the galaxy on their shoulders, they began to gather allies. They reached out to other mining colonies, to influential figures within the Federation, and to anyone who would listen. Their message was simple: the truth needed to be known, and the Federation's plan had to be stopped. But not everyone was on their side. The Federation was vast, its reach extending across the galaxy. The forces they had at their disposal were powerful, and they were beginning to close in on the rebellious station. Soon, the rebellion would no longer be a secret. It would be a fight for the future of the galaxy. As the final preparations for the rebellion were underway, Liam stood beside Allura, looking out at the station's frozen horizon. He had never imagined his life would take such a turn. One moment he was simply doing his job, and the next he was preparing for a battle that could change the course of history. "Do you think we can win?" Liam asked quietly, his voice full of uncertainty. Allura didn't hesitate. "We will win, Liam. We have no choice but to fight." And so, with their cause clear and their hearts set on the truth, they prepared for the storm that was about to break over Glacier Station. The days following their decision to rebel were filled with tension. Liam and Allura could feel the weight of the impending conflict pressing down on them. Every decision, every action they took, was a step closer to either victory or failure. The Federation's forces were already on their way to Glacier Station, and the unrest among the miners was growing more intense by the hour. The people were ready to rise up, but would they have enough strength to fight against the Federation's mighty forces? Liam had never imagined he would be part of a revolution. As a child, he had dreamed of becoming a diplomat, a career where he could solve problems without violence. But now, he was standing on the edge of something much bigger. It wasn't just about Glacier Station anymore. It was about the very future of the Federation, about the balance of power in the galaxy. Allura stood beside him, her face set in a determined expression. She had always known what it was like to carry the weight of responsibility, but now her burden was even heavier. She was not just a princess anymore. She was a leader of a rebellion, and she had to make decisions that would affect the lives of thousands. "We can't afford to fail," Allura said, her voice low but filled with resolve. "If we do, this whole station will fall under the control of those corrupt officials. And it won't just stop here. The Federation will continue to take advantage of everyone, everywhere." Liam nodded. He understood the stakes. But even as the situation grew more dangerous, he found himself drawn to Allura's strength. She had no fear, no hesitation. She was a leader, someone who would stop at nothing to bring justice to the people. He admired her, and he knew she wasn't doing this for her own gain. She was doing it because she believed it was the right thing to do. The plan was simple in theory: gather as many miners as possible, form a resistance, and confront the Federation's forces head-on. But in practice, it was far more complicated. The Federation wasn't just an enemy. It was a massive, highly organized entity with resources far beyond what the miners could ever hope to have. But Alora had made it clear, they didn't need resources. They had the people. And if they could unite the workers, they could overcome the Federation's power. Liam and Alora spent every moment they could rallying support. They traveled to the deepest parts of the station, speaking to every miner, every worker, every person who felt the weight of the Federation's oppression. They told them the truth. The Federation had been exploiting them, using their hard labor to fuel the wealth of the elite while leaving the workers to suffer. The miners had a right to their freedom, a right to control their own futures. Some were hesitant at first. They had lived under the Federation's rule for so long, they couldn't imagine life any other way. Others were afraid of what would happen if they stood up against the Federation. But as Alora and Liam spoke, their words began to spark something in the people's hearts, a sense of unity, a sense of hope. Slowly, the resistance began to grow, but the Federation was not blind to the rising rebellion. Their forces were already on the move, preparing to crush any sign of resistance before it could gain momentum. They sent in more soldiers, more mercenaries, and began locking down key areas of the station, trying to suffocate the rebellion in its cradle. Their plan was simple: isolate the miners, prevent them from organizing, and then wipe them out. Alora knew they had to act quickly. Time was running out. One night, as they sat in their makeshift command center, the tension in the room was palpable. The resistance had grown, but it was still outnumbered and outgunned. They had to be strategic. Every move had to count. "We can't fight them on their terms," Liam said, pacing back and forth. "They have the weapons, they have the soldiers. We need to hit them where it hurts." Alora was silent for a moment, thinking. Then she stood up, her eyes shining with determination. "We'll take their control center. If we can disrupt their communication and their command structure, it will buy us enough time to organize the miners and strike back." It was a bold plan. The Federation's command center was heavily fortified, with armed guards and surveillance systems at every entrance. It would be a difficult target, but Alora was confident. She knew that without a strong leadership structure, the Federation's forces would fall apart. They couldn't afford to wait any longer. The night of the attack, the air was thick with anticipation. Liam, Alora, and a small group of the most trusted rebels gathered near the entrance to the command center. Their hearts were pounding, their breaths quick, but they all knew what they had to do. It was now or never. Alora gave the signal, and the team moved into position. They worked quickly and quietly, using every advantage they had. They disabled the station's security systems and cut off the communication channels to prevent the Federation from calling for reinforcements. The plan was risky, but it was their best chance. Inside the command center, alarms began to sound. The Federation forces were caught off guard. They scrambled to respond, but by the time they realized what was happening, it was too late. The rebels had taken control. Liam and Alora moved through the facility, fighting off resistance as they went. The Federation soldiers were fierce, but the miners had the advantage. They knew the station better than anyone, and they fought with the fury of those who had been oppressed for far too long. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached the central control room. The leader of the Federation's forces, a cold and calculating officer named General Kalen, stood waiting for them. He wasn't afraid. He had seen rebellions before, and he had crushed them all. But this time things were different. "You're too late," General Kalen sneered, his hand resting on the control panel. "The Federation's forces will be here any minute. You failed." Alora didn't flinch. "You're the one who's failed, Kalen. The people are taking back what's rightfully theirs." With a single motion, she disabled the station's main power grid, plunging the control room into darkness. The Federation forces scrambled to regain control, but the rebellion had already won. The Federation's command was in chaos. The rest of the battle was a blur. The Federation forces, leaderless and disorganized, were quickly overwhelmed. The rebels had taken the station. The miners, once oppressed and afraid, now stood victorious. As the dust settled, Alora and Liam stood together looking out over the station. The victory was theirs, but the war was far from over. The Federation would retaliate. They always did. But for the first time in a long while, Alora felt a sense of hope. The miners had taken their first step toward freedom. Liam turned to her, his eyes filled with admiration. "You did it. We did it." Alora smiled, though it was a smile filled with the weight of responsibility. "It's not over yet, Liam. This is just the beginning. But we've shown the galaxy that the people have the power to change their fate." And so, as the Resistance celebrated their hard-won victory, Alora knew there was still much work to be done. The Federation would not give up easily, but the miners had proved that they were no longer willing to accept a life of oppression. The rebellion had begun, and it was stronger than ever. The fight for freedom had only just started.